to the T-roh Show. Transmitting truth one week at a time.
Welcome to the 45th broadcast of the T-roh Show. It's your host, Keith, and there's Stu.
Good afternoon.
All right, we've got a lot to cover today. I think we ended last week with intangible property rights. But today we're going to go a little deeper into things so that people understand how the system, in quotations, operates, how it works. It's going to be very simple to understand, but unbelievable because it is so simple. And all of the, most if not all of the researchers out there miss this very small thing. But that's okay. You know, we all did for a certain period of time, but you can't fool all the people all of the time. You can fool some of them some of the time. So that being said, Stu, I think you have the original lodge. Wait a minute. I'll tell you what. Let's not go there yet. Let me go to intangible property first. Then we'll go over to. We can go to that. All right.
Mm-hmm. That's fine.
All right. Okay. I did extensive research and put up a highly detailed map here. I wrote my stick man to illustrate what this is, and this took forever. Put a lot of work into it. But anyway, okay, here's you. Here's tangible property. This could be auto, house, clothes. Could be basically anything that you want. That's called tangible property. Here you are, and there's a jurisdiction between you and your tangible property. Okay, and that is usually where your person comes in. So everybody says, do you have this on your person? Blah, 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 blah. You have it on your person. You'll get the idea. So intangible property jurisdiction is a complete and separate body of law from tangible property, auto, house, clothes, or actually the property itself. It's your right to it. It's okay. So the reason why Title 26, meaning the IRS law or codes, are not fully understood is because all tax laws deal with intangible property. Now, intangible property means that your right to that house, the car, the clothes, that kind of thing. So this is you. You have the right to this property here.
So in other words, I can own an automobile, but I also possess the intangible property right to that automobile.
Right.
Which is something that I could contract out.
You can lease it.
Yep.
You can rent it. You can let somebody borrow it. You have control of your intangible property. Unless you have Title 26. The whole IRS code is based on all tax laws, no matter what they are. I'm not going to pick just on the IRS. There's tax laws everywhere in the world. All tax laws since their existence only deal with intangible property, not the property itself. So they might, in order to hide this, they might say, well, did you pay the taxes on the car? Your yearly tax bill on the car? No, I didn't. And you've never paid a yearly tax bill on the car. You have never paid a yearly tax bill on property, on land, house. Never. You've only paid taxes on the intangible property to the house itself, not on the house.
So in common language, basically we're talking about property tax, for instance. Really, I guess I'm interpreting it as that you're paying a property. They call it a property tax, but really what you're paying for is you're paying the intangible. You're paying for the intangible property right to have and use.
To the use of the house.
Right.
So, okay, so you're paying a property tax, and you're exactly right that you are paying a property tax. You're paying an intangible property tax, which is never divulged to you what type of property tax it is. They never define it. See what I mean?
Right. So in short, you're paying rent in the standard way, but you're also paying rent in a hidden way. It's
yes.
Kind of a common way to look at it, street level.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you have in a sense, yeah, you actually have never really paid tangible property taxes at all. In your whole life, nobody's ever done it. They do a really good job of hiding it because they tax it based on what the house is worth and, square footage and all this other stuff. So you're assuming you're paying that on the house, and no, that's not what they're doing. They're just raising the bill. They're finding ways to get a higher bill. That's all it is. On the intangible property assessment, you're benefiting from 6,000 square feet. You're benefiting from 2,500 square feet. So if you're benefiting from that amount, this is what we're going to charge you for the use of it. It's just a use tax. They call it a use tax, but it's actually an intangible property tax. That's the definition of it. And they quote these based on your person. Okay, people will call it an all cap name, or they call it whatever, but it's based on a person. It doesn't really matter how it's spelled or what it is. So this jurisdiction here, where Rockefeller comes in and says, control everything, own nothing. That's the jurisdiction he's talking about right here. He's talking about control your intangible property right to property. You control everything. That's what that means. And the US dollar Federal Reserve note is the vehicle by which the intangible property is seized. So for instance, out there, I think BLM was having a tiff with some folks about grazing rights. And this guy had grazing rights, and they started trying to tax his intangible property right to the grazing lands, at which he started protesting. Well, you owe this, you owe that, this lease amount, that kind of thing. And that got into a huge mess, and that's still going on today. But it's because the arguments are not understood. Nobody understands really what's going on here. So we'll give you, for instance, we'll go to a Second Amendment. And this would be, okay, so a well-regulated, this is what it actually reads, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the right of the people to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I think that's close. But if you, they just didn't write it out. So this was a well-regulated militia being necessary to the intangible property right of the people to the security of a free state. The intangible property right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. If they would have put in the intangible property right of the people, none of this would be going on, because there would be no secret societies, there would be no secret anything, because everyone would understand the law. you have the intangible property right of the people to keep and bear arms, not necessarily to keep and bear arms. You have the intangible property right to that. So I just added in where what was implied, but it was never written out. And the Masonic lodges did not want to be responsible or wanted to hide the intangible property rights jurisdiction, the intangible property right body of law, all these things, because if they didn't, then they wouldn't be able to tax. Because in order to be able to tax you, your labor, you have to actually transfer your intangible property right to your labor, not your labor itself, because labor is never taxed. It's your intangible property right to your labor that's being taxed. You would never transfer that to the IRS, where they can then come back and legally tax you or tax your intangible property right to your labor. They wouldn't be able to control you with it. It's because you would know about it. You'd be able to pick out every little, no scam would ever work again, because you would be able to pick out everything that these guys are doing.
Yeah, let's walk through this, the Second Amendment example you got here. So the well-regulated militia being necessary to, and I know you inserted these phrases.
I inserted them.
Yep. To the intangible property right of the people to the security of a free state. So what we're acknowledging here is that upon, basically upon birth, upon being part of the human family, an individual has an intangible property right to belonging to a state, not only a state, but a free state. In order to accomplish that, we also have to acknowledge that a militia is necessary, because there will be people that will infringe upon that intangible property right.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, they do every day.
Right, exactly. Okay. Simultaneously, just as a well-regulated militia is necessary, so too is the second part of the amendment, which is the right to keep and bear arms. So they're addressing a group of individuals with the militia, but they're also addressing the individual having the right to keep and bear arms in support of the premise that being born into the human family, you have a right to the security of a free state.
Right. So you have the intangible property right to keep and bear arms. So there's two separate properties there. To keep and bear arms is the tangible. The intangible property right to keep and bear arms is also a separate property. There's
Right.
two properties there.
Right. So it's sort of like yeah, I've got in this drawer I've got a weapon. In the other drawer I've got the ability,
The right to have that weapon, or to
Correct.
to that weapon.
Right, exactly.
So that's a separate drawer. It's a separate cabinet
Mm-hmm.
of a whole body of laws that are never really written. They're just implied in different places to make it appear as if it is legitimate.
Yeah, and for the I think we just quickly, we don't have to get into huge detail here, but for some of the new folks, this intangible property right concept, it ties in. You're probably most familiar with it. It ties into like copyrights and trademarks. So it is.
Oh yeah.
It's not a archaic thing. It's something that you can look up that it's being used. But as Keith is putting forward, the mass of it, the mass concepts behind it are hidden from the general public.
Right. Patent laws, copyright laws, the
Yeah.
copyrights to the laws. In other words,
Right.
you have a copyright. It's actually it's a possessive, but you have a copyright of certain materials. So you can actually license out that copyright to others, and that's dealing with nothing but intangible property. When you license out your copyright to something, to particular items, it's not necessarily the item itself that you have a copyright on it, or that you own. it's the copyright to it. In other words, you have the right to copy it and distribute it.
Right. So take your classic like paperback book. You go into a bookstore and you buy the book. You don't possess the ability to make money off of that book. You own the book for personal property to read, whatever, but you don't own the ability
to copy it.
Right, and circulate it for cash to resell.
Right, because so you can't own language, you can't own words and things like that. That's infringing on everybody else's intangible property right to language. So the book itself, the author may have wrote it, but he doesn't necessarily own it. He only owns the intangible property right to copy it and distribute it and sell it. You get what I mean? So that's kind of how it operates. And it's the same thing with people that write plugins for WordPress or different software and programs. The software and programs are all written in zeros and ones and things like that with coding and everything. They don't own the coding. They don't own the zeros and ones. They don't own any of that. They took that property and made something out of it, and they only have the intangible property right to copy it. That's it. And they can license that out. That's the other side of intangible property rights.
Right. So, and this is just an example, and perhaps it'll clarify for some of the listeners. You see this in advertising where a song, right, is used by, a corporation. So the Beatles, they compose a song, they've got the copyright, but they can do a transaction based on that copyright and allow an advertiser to run that song in the background, so that you're associating the Beatles with their product, and you're ready to buy.
Right. Now they call it intellectual property.
Mm-hmm. And for that they get a fee. Mm-hmm.
Right, in order to brand it. Okay, so they're branding it. That's our intellectual property. In other words, this is what we took, which was public property. We put something together. They don't own the tones. They don't own the notes. They don't own the instruments. They don't own the words. They only own their version of the words for 20 years, their version of it. And then they claim the intangible property right to copy it. And that's called, and when they want to grant that to other people, that's called a license. That's all that's happening. In any industry, as far as music, movies, no matter what, that's all it is. But intangible property goes to everything. These are what people call God-given. Your intangible property right to the security of a free state. It didn't say you had the intangible property right to a free state or of a free state. So this is what they did to get around it. They went ahead and created a state within a state, because this says to the security of a free state. If the state is not free, then that intangible property right's gone. That's how little sneakies do it, Little guys get in sneak stuff.
Exactly. They play with the words and the concepts behind the words.
Mm-hmm. So if the state is not free, which we talked about in the 1789 Constitution by the genocide against the original states, all of a sudden that amendment meant nothing. And you'll find that in a lot of their writings. They'll do that everywhere. You may have the being necessary to the security of a free state, okay? Being that, because that's really what the wording is, being necessary to the security of a free state. I added in the intangible property right of the people to the security of a free state. I added that in. Now it's understandable. Now that you understand that there's an intangible property right there, now you can see the deception in it. And we're not attacking the right to keep and bear arms. Trust me, the government of the United States of America, We have an act that says you can have a tank in your front yard. We don't care. Okay, that's not what we're doing here. Just trying to explain that don't hang your rights and your intangible property rights on sneaky writings. Okay, watch what you're doing there, because you're saying it's guaranteed and all this other stuff. Well, obviously, it's being attacked on a daily basis.
Right. And their justification is that it says a free state. Well, their states aren't free.
Right. So the security is gone.
Yeah.
So it wipes it out. So they just redefine a free state to a not free state. So that wipes out the whole first sentence. Messed up, isn't it?
It's diabolical. I mean, you got a whole bunch of people running around going, "Yeah, I'm entitled to the free state."
Yeah, and
that's not really what they're communicating. And it's not really the environment that you're in.
Right, because it's the definition, a free state, or a definition thereof, has been completely wiped out, because what if the state isn't free? So you could have said the intangible property right of the people to the security of a free state. Now we're dealing with security. Okay, now we're dealing with a completely different subject matter, because security and free state would have been synonymous with each other. But the way they wrote it here, it just meant, well, if it's not defined as a free state, which when the Masons, put together their constitution and all that, came out and said, oh, we have a new national government. No, you have a new, you guys just all committed treason. But anyway, they genocided all the independent free states. And then they put this crap in there to appease people, because they knew people didn't really understand that the intangible property rights is a completely separate body of law. But when you put this stuff in there, it's easier to understand how it's written. Okay, so if you put in there the intangible property right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, it just says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So basically, what did they do? They redefined the people from in a constant state of war. But that's either here or there. That however they want to write it and however they want to do it, that's their business. American nationals and residents and general postmasters under the Articles of Confederation as amended August 5th, 2015. And it was amended 2 other times before that. We're not under the Constitution anyways, and we can prove that. So it really doesn't affect us at all. Okay, so now we've got to go in and talk about something else I found on the internet. It was actually not bad, the way that they described it here. I don't agree with all of it, but I'm going to read it anyways. I don't agree with the whole assessment of this, because I think it's a little bit I don't know how. Let me just read it, and I'll show you which I don't agree with, what I do agree with. This came from the henrymacau.com. I'm sure the guy is famous in certain circles, but and obviously he has what they call what most people would say was a conspiracy website. But he does explain the system very well, especially how we have experienced it, and many others have experienced it. Then we're going to show you the source and how the system actually works, which I think is going to be interesting to a lot of people. But not all frontline judges in the U.S. are Freemasons, but senior judges are. They ensure Freemasons are favored and verdicts follow the agenda. What's the agenda? That's the communist agenda.
And what's he really saying there? What he's saying is that your your local guy, your local judge, may not be a hardcore Freemason, but as you go through appeal courts, it becomes more and more likely you're going to hit a life, lifer.
Positions of power, yeah.
Lifer as a Freemason, yeah.
Right. Okay. So, and so they have what they call plausible deniability, that the whole system's run by Masons. They don't want anybody to know that. Now, a judge will often blanch when he sees a Masonic ring on a lawyer's finger and will rule in his favor. Masons also network using secret passwords, hand signs, and handshakes. That's common knowledge now. Women judges are often members of the Eastern Star. The feminist agenda is synonymous with Freemasonry. Freemasons, Illuminati generally handpick federal and state judges. Well, yeah, they're appointed. The federal judiciary is swollen with former senior law partners whose main clients were the big banks and corporations. These judges are often placed in cases involving judicial and governmental abuse. They are generally wealthy, white, or Jewish males who went to elite schools with no real interest in civil and human rights violations. That's absolutely correct. Just as a side note, there was a guy that came out with, it was Captain Rose, who just got the Congressional Medal of Honor. And he was a part of the Knights of Columbus. That's out of Trump's mouth. Knights of Columbus is controlled by the Freemasons. So he supposedly, saved 60 to 80 guys, or how many guys were there during this horrendous firefight where they were not supposed to be. Hello. And he was part of the Knights of Columbus. So it kind of, begs to show you there that all wars are Masonic wars, created by Masons and carried out by Masons. All wars. You tired of the wars? We'll show you generally how to deal with that. All right. Similarly, small state court judges are selected by feminist and race-baiting movements whose function as a type of legality sanctioned mafia, intimidating those few honest judges and opposing counsel routinely. I don't agree with this. I think they're all Masons. That's just my opinion, but I think they are, based on what I'm seeing. They go after political dissenters. This is the big time problem here. Okay. You bring a constitution into the courtroom and you're considered a political dissenter in opposition. We're going to tell you why that is here in just a little while. Silencing those U.S. citizens whom they deem to be antithetical or enemies of the state. It says Masons choose minority candidates as judges because, like President Obama, it is virtually impossible to accuse a minority judge of racism, discrimination, violating one's civil liberties and human rights.
Which, of course, is their agenda.
Right. Now, when you see this lineup of these police officers and everything else, it's no big deal. But a lot of people are going to miss the whole Masonic thing, the label. Well, look at here. They would all miss that because the checkerboard is a Masonic sign.
Yeah, they use it as flooring.
So these are all Masons, whether they know it or not. They have the Masonic uniform on.
Yeah, the individual may not be a Mason as far as card carrying, but
the uniform is.
Right, and then operating within that environment, they're implementing, Masonic rules of the road.
Right. I remember a guy telling me, he said, he was a cop. He says, look, I personally agree with everything that's being said, but when I have this uniform on, I have to do certain things. So the Masonic bylaws are on the uniform itself, not the man or woman. Okay, that's difficult to understand for a lot of people to make that distinction. This is how sneaky these guys are. Okay, now the federal and state law enforcement operates in almost the same way. While the lower level of field agents and beat cops are normally 100% sympathetic with the plights of the downtrodden, their superiors are selected to be exactly opposite. Now, their superiors are Masons. Their betrayal of American principles is the sole factor in deciding whether they are promoted. Okay, this is where I think that this next paragraph is where I think there's a lot of deception in the minds of a lot of people, and I'll show you why. Statutes such as the Violence Against Women's Act, the Child Support Enforcement Act, and hate crimes, and other dubious federal and state enacted laws, which violate the U.S. Constitution. Well, okay, but allow the Masons to persecute political descendants. This is in complete and total violation of their First, Second, Fourth, Fifth, and 13th Amendment rights. Well, the 13th Amendment makes you a slave. We've gone over that. And we've also gone over the second here. And essentially, the U.S. Constitution was a Masonic document passed by Masons out of their own mouth. I'm not saying this as a conspiracy theorist. They said it. Not me. I'm just reporting it. Okay? So this is where there's a lot of deception in the minds of a lot of people. Okay? And this is where I think some of that is deceptive as far as how it's being presented. It says their targets are denied due process of law and any methods of which to defend their innocence. Similarly, the local Child Protective Service will seize the children of targeted individuals with complete and total impunity. Often these children will wind up in global sex trade. I cannot believe that this has not started a revolution. People will sit there and just not do a damn thing. If that was my son, watch out.
Well, I think there's awakening occurring. You know, it might take a little while, but
if I have people in my house trying to take my children, get in between us. Let's go. You know, I mean, seriously, you're not touching them. But you know, I'm not in that position. I don't want to really, you know, but I'm just thinking, you know, that you would think that would start more. It's just interesting that it doesn't. There must be in the food. It's got to be in the, you know, it's got to be something of why people are not standing up like that. It says judges then deny routine motions, humiliate dissidents in open court with ridicule, abuse, and derision. I've seen that. Given legal advice to their opposition while denying their victims the same benefit. Seen that about 100 times. That's basically in every case. It says allowing the opposition of arbitrarily missed court appearances while threatening their targeted victim with arrest if they don't show up and due to being sick or injured. That's true. That is the local courts. That's the state courts. That's the U.S. courts, folks. That is exactly what's going on there. I can fully agree with that. As a dissident, your fate has already been determined by the Freemason Illuminati. Absolutely correct, and I'll show you how. And these court procedures are simply to cover up for political persecution, and that's exactly right.
Yeah, I'd agree with it.
100% agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, just about everything in the first 4 paragraphs or so.
Yeah.
You know, we established, I think it was last week, didn't we? We established they have a big presence within the court because we had that PDF manual when we were talking about their hand signals and things like that.
Well, they have their symbol or their brand right on the front door most of the time, right in the window.
Mm-hmm.
People just walk in and think, oh, well, that's just the Mason. They got they all associate them with the little red cat, you know, the little cups. I call them cups. Little red hats they got on there. They think that's them, and it's actually not. Okay, if you try to complain to the various watchdog agencies charged with investigating misconduct by the police, district and U.S. attorney judges and prosecutors, such as the local police internal affairs bureau, which is a total joke, the FBI and DOJ civil rights or public corruption units, the Commission on Judicial Conduct Boards, and that kind of tells you, man, if you got to have all these, you got a real problem. If you got to have all these different areas to deal with the public corruption, that's a problem, guys. Or the departmental disciplinary committees regulating prosecutor attorneys, you will quickly discover that even though the lower level investigators may be highly sympathetic, the higher ups in those organizations invariably have been pre-selected by the Freemasons and Illuminati. How about we do this? How about we say the investigators may be highly sympathetic? The investigators act like they are highly sympathetic to try to shut you up. How about that?
Yeah.
When actually they don't care. They could care less. They hear 50 of you, pay the fine and shut up.
Yeah, and if you're gonna attempt to do battle in their courts, I mean, what's really occurring? You're hiring one of their representatives, a Mason, as a defense lawyer. So the ultimate decision isn't justice. The ultimate decision is, well, you can pay the court directly, or you can pay our Masonic lodge via the defense lawyer. One of the two.
Right.
Either way, we ring the register.
Right. So they will surely shit can your complaints and investigations. They will most assuredly report your audacity to the offending officials, who will most assuredly further retaliate more aggressively than before, digging your legal hole even deeper. And I've seen that 1,000 times, folks. We get stories like that almost every day. Almost every day. This is how it works, and it's only going to get worse as time passes if people don't do something about it. Okay, so that kind of helps, people understand what's really kind of going on. If you've never been involved in this, you wouldn't know. Wait till one time you get a traffic ticket and you want to make a complaint on that cop. Just wait one time. That dude will drive by your house. And they'll let him do it too. He'll gang stalk you everywhere you go. He'll try to pull you over and give you a ticket all the time. He'll harass the crap out of you. They take it personal.
Yeah, and isn't that really the problem? I mean, this is, again, to clarify for people that are just kind of catching on, this is a membership-based society, the Freemasons. You pay fees, you take an oath. So your loyalties lie to your brothers. And, that's fine. There's nothing inherently wrong with something like that. The problem is that they have the police out there, and they're pirating people. They're applying their private membership rules and regs to people that aren't part of their society, and that's the problem.
Right. Remember when that guy Hillary's he made that movie Hillary's America? They started blaming it on the Democrats. Remember that?
Yeah.
Well, there's a little bit different story here. Okay. Let me see if I can. That should be it there. Okay. It's very interesting that a lot of the, if not 100% of the racism in this country is coming from this private organization. Because they talk about it in a million different areas. We have some, and some of this might be disturbing to people, so just bear with it. This is just how it is. Okay. Some variations in the above ritual will exist between jurisdictions and countries, but each variation will recognize around the world a duly constituted lodge. Exceptions exist, as denotes the so-called Black African Lodge. These lodges were created to appease pressure from the Black community and to maintain a Masonic influence within the Black community. Hello. Freemasonry, however, has never recognized Black Masonry as being legitimate. This prejudicial attitude gave rise to the creation of the Ku Klux Klan in 1867. A Masonic order, the KKK, was created from an existing order known as the Knights of the Golden Circle, renamed to be called the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. This new order provided a secret and subversive mechanism for the ongoing control and persecution of blacks in North America after the U.S. Civil War.
Right, and if I could quickly jump in before you continue reading, we also know from previous shows that Edward Mandell House took the Texas KKK and converted it, presumably under the idea that they were catching bad press, but converted it into the Texas Rangers. Edward Mandell House, right, was the one that interacted with who's the president there that did the Federal Reserve Act.
Wilson.
So
Wilson.
Wilson, yep. Yep. So you see how my point is ultimately how a lot of this stuff actually does tie together. But they've got it, they've got it hidden well, and they certainly don't, they don't want to expose any of this. So it's
well, chalk it up for the T-roh show, right?
Yeah,
all right.
exactly.
And there's been a lot of people on the internet, YouTube, but we have a different way of doing this. So we don't want to run it into conspiracy theories and all that kind of stuff. We're just showing you the way it is. And these are the facts, and deal with it or not. That's the way you're going to deal with this. It's what you have to deal with. Now, you have a lot of black people complaining that they get a greater conviction rate, harsher sentencing in the courtroom and everything. Well, it's not a conspiracy. It's true. The creation of the KKK as a Masonic order helps to explain why blacks traditionally receive a greater conviction rate and harsher sentencing in the courtroom. It also explains, folks, that the 1790 a Naturalization Act under the Masonic Constitution only dealt with white males only. Hello? Come on. Folks, get it. There was a secret society. It was not a national government. That's what we keep trying to tell people. Reverend Finney adds insight in this example of Masonic prejudice from his book. It's absolutely true. They have a bunch of them, and this goes, it goes in deeper as far as this is concerned. This is called Courts and Freemasonry. You can find this on the internet, courtandfreemasons.pdf. You can find it on the internet and see it, anytime you want. It has, it gets into all kinds of things, okay? And it does get very specific on, Prince Hall, I think, named Prince Hall. There were a bunch of issues where Captain Morgan was killed. He was murdered for exposing this, which caused a huge drop in Freemasonry, because they found 136 crimes created or committed by Masons to cover up the Captain Morgan murder. And these were all Masons that were in office. Okay. So how, I have some other stuff here, but it's kind of redundant in a way. I think people are, you can get the idea of what's happening here. However, what I want to do is show you how this operates. Okay, do you have that lodge, the New York one?
I do. Stand by. So here's the Grand Lodge of the State of New York website.
Okay.
They're located at here, 71 West 23rd Street, New York, New York. And if we pull up a map, we'll back out and we'll see that it's what? It's Manhattan Island.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Okay. There's the word Manhattan right there, but this area here represents Manhattan Island.
All right, so we're not so crazy after all, are we? That's the oldest one in New York, correct?
Yes. What did I say earlier? It was they have jurisdiction over 600,000 Masons or something like that.
Uh-huh.
in 800 lodges.
That's huge.
Yeah.
There's the North Star.
Yeah, I don't
They
think
call it the North Star, forever, what do you call that? Forever stable, always remains in the same place. That's the oldest Masonic lodge.
I just wanted to point this out, Keith, real quick. We'll get back to the New York one in a second. Just for the folks here, you'll note that the oldest Masonic lodge that they were able to find valid, verifiable lodge minutes is, back in the 1500s.
Okay, keep in mind, folks, minutes. because I'm going to show you how this operates.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
Lodge minutes. Keep
yeah.
that in mind.
Mm-hmm. So, you know, this isn't necessarily a 200. This didn't come around. The point I'm trying to make is that this organization was in existence prior to the Constitution, prior to all of that. It's not a new thing. In fact, there is a body of work out there that you can Google and research where you know, folks have been standing against the Masonic lodges, Freemasonry, for, you know, back in the 1700s, because it was a problem back then. And they just, you know, I think they knew a little bit more about it than, you know, our modern societies do. But I did want to point out that it goes back quite a bit, you know, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years.
Okay. Oh, but you can get a ring for $50 if you want. That's pretty cool. Okay, so they said in another doc, and at the moment I can't really find it, but we'll get into the exemptions here in just a little while. But I want to tell you how this actually operates. There's another doc that I have that basically shows that Lodge 9 was created, and I'll have to find it again. I read it last night and then I forgot which one it was, but Lodge 9 was created. So and it explained this in specifics. It's a 190-page document, and it's talking about that the so-called federal government, okay, was created actually in New York, and it went to Philadelphia as a temporary capital. That's what they called it. Then Lodge 9 was created of what is now called a federal district. So they put in Lodge 9, created a federal district, which looks like basically a Colosseum around it, Roman Colosseum, and then built the White House and all that within that federal district. And everybody kind of sits around and watches what the White House does, if you kind of get the idea, you know, fictionally. And then they said the permanent capital was Washington, D.C. Well, that was all done by a secret society, folks. It had nothing to do with anybody. All the people were completely left out of that. There was no vote. There was no nothing to make all that happen. In contrast with all the people voted on the Articles of Confederation in 1781. They voted, they sent their delegates in, the delegates voted the will of the people at that time. So there was a high influence in the, after the Revolutionary War, when they got rid of the British East India Trading Company, that the Masons just kind of moved in. They knew the people were tired of revolution and everything else, and then just started browbeating the crap out of them. So the Masonic Lodge was the one that signed the Treaty of Paris, not the Articles of Confederation. There was that never happened in 1781, or the 1781 Articles of Confederation. This has nothing to do with the U.S. Civil War. So if anybody doesn't know their history, just go look it up. Okay, we're tired of explaining that there's two different ones there. You say the word Confederacy and they automatically think U.S. Civil War, because they just don't know, because the Masons taught you. So that was all. It is what it is. Okay, and it's basically today the Masonic Lodge and all that has, or the Masons are all basically nothing more than a communist fascist organization. That's all it is. They've always had control of the so-called federal constitution. They've always had full control over it and everything else, but it really is just nothing more than a constitution for a private organization. Okay, understand that. So if that's the case, that private organization has to have bylaws. The way they create the bylaws is in the minutes of their meetings. So we'll give you, for instance, you ever wonder why women don't get equal rights and equal pay? Anybody ever wonder that, folks? Do you ever wonder that? This is the reason why. Okay, Lodge 9, their constitution was what you know as the federal constitution. That was their constitution. And they have bylaws that go along with that. Okay, these are private laws within the organization. Right here. So they might have they might have the minutes of a meeting, and instead of an official record, so it's actually an official record, they have a minutes of the meeting. And in those bylaws, they'll say the members of Eastern Star, this is the women's organization, will never get equal pay as opposed to those within Lodge number 9 or the Grand Lodge of New York or any other lodge. Okay, that's how it operates. That becomes a law within the society. And if that society becomes enormous, people won't realize that there's actually what they call worshipful grand masters writing these laws, these bylaws. Then those bylaws manifest themselves to the rest of the world as what they call, in quotations, a act of the U.S. Congress. So where do you think these puppets get their paperwork? You really think a congressman or a senator is smart enough to write any of that? No. They have other people writing that kind of stuff. Okay, but there's a lot of standing orders. Give you an example. The chameleon paper. How did the Federal Reserve Masonic organization get a copyright on the chameleon paper? Now, the chameleon paper, everybody goes, well, what the hell is that? It's the paper that your money's written on, that's printed on. It's what you have in your pocket every day. That's called chameleon paper. So one guy created it. Louis Caspasier foreclosed on his printing company and took his chameleon paper, his discovery, his patent, He took his intangible property rights to it and made a phone call to the Masonic federal government or federal corporations. This is basically what it is. They even tell you that in Title 28. I mean, they tell you 26, 28. It's a federal corporation. They call that, you're told it's a government, so you're manipulated because Jesus said, do what government tells you to do. And so they tell you it's a government, and that's how they manipulate you. Then they get the copyright and they make what they call a federal bylaw that says nobody else can use the chameleon paper. That's how they do it. It's that simple. Someone wrote it down in their bylaws. You ever wonder why a law doesn't go into effect but every year? Because bylaws of private organizations do not go into effect unless a year has passed. So every time they change or add it, it takes a year for it to take effect, so that all the members can be notified and all that kind of thing. That's just how it operates. So what we're saying is, if Lodge 9 has a meeting, and in the meeting they say, no one can spit on the sidewalk. Okay. No one can spit on the sidewalk between 123 Main Street and 123 Federal Avenue. Okay? That's what they discussed. Just as an example. So no one can spit on the sidewalk between 123 Main Street and 123 Federal Avenue. Okay. The law, you got to take out the word bylaw because you don't want anybody to know it's private. You got to take out the word that and put law in all lowercase letters. That's why they removed the capital L, Law of Nations. they remove the capital L because it's not a public law. It's a private law within their organization. Shall take effect 1 year from today. Okay. Got the word form there. All right. 1 year from today. Now, then it goes into the newspaper, kind of in the back section of a newspaper and legal notices. You always notice legal notices is not on the front page. Then once that goes into play, all right, now the bylaw is there, and then they just get a hold of a congressman or a senator to introduce a bill. And that, a year later, is when you know about it. That's how it works. Because Lodge 9, or the Grand Lodge in New York, came up with it. They wrote it in their minutes. They discussed it. Minutes of the meeting is nothing more than what happened during the meeting. They wrote it in their bylaws. Okay. Once their bylaws were written, it takes effect for 1 year. They're fairly lazy because they don't define the word spit. They don't define, when this law, in other words, can you spit during the day or at night? Or is it this 24-hour period? Who does the law apply to?
I was going to say that. That's the key one right there. Rather than no one can spit, they should be saying no member can spit.
No Mason can spit on the sidewalk.
Even better.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And that's how all the laws should be written. No Mason can do this. No Mason can do that. Okay. But they don't tell you that. They're not going to say that because, why? Because they call their corporation a government. So all the Christians will go, well, Jesus said we do this. And that's how they control you. They manipulate you the way that you think and operate. They do it with religion. Now, what does that make the Eastern Star? You notice they have the Northern Star. They got the Eastern Star and all this other stuff. Masons are inherently religious freaks. They always have been. What they are is a group of people that are extreme, overzealous religious freaks. They're crazy to a point when it comes to religion, belief, and all that kind of thing. They're so crazy to a point that they'll put their life on the line. They'll tell you they're putting their life on the line for you, but they're only putting their life on the line for other Masons. That's how they are. So most people will ask, okay, if you guys are government of the United States of America, that's all great and well, good and well. We'll go with that. And I'll tell you what, why haven't you talked about Mandalay Bay and all this other stuff, 9/11 and all these other things? Well, folks, we have been talking about it this whole time. We've been talking about the shooters in Mandalay Bay. We've been talking about the Hooters restaurant deal where more people were killed. We've been talking about the fact that there were 2 shooters. We've been talking about everything that is going on today. But what we've been talking about is not necessarily that subject matter. We've been talking about who is responsible for all of it. That's what we've been talking about. Who's responsible for all of it?
I just put up a screen share real quick for folks that don't know anything about companies or associations and stuff. I thought we'd show them quickly what
Okay.
bylaws look like.
Yeah, we're not making it up. Here's American Bar Association. Notice the title of the document, right? Constitution, and bylaws. Okay, rules of procedure for House of Delegates, right? They're what? They're Congress. Mm-hmm.
Okay, but this is what a document that's bylaws looks like, and what it is it's a guide. Here we are, right here. It's a guide to the do's and don'ts, capabilities, authorities spelled out. of the particular organization, and then gets into membership and what members are capable of doing and not doing. Okay, so it's broken down. It's just kind of a spelled out document. They include here. You can see there's definitions included.
Right. Look at the purpose. Okay. The purpose of the association. This is just a private club, guys. Okay. Just understand it's a private club. The purpose of the association to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States and maintain representative government. Well, go and try to bring a constitution in one of their courts.
Well, they can.
Yeah, yeah, they can do it.
They can. I can't. I'm not a member.
Right. And so you're not a Mason, so you're still not a member. And so you don't have a intangible property right to the Constitution of the United States, is what we've been trying to tell people for months now.
Exactly.
To advance the science of jurisprudence, that's their religion, science, to promote throughout the nation the administrative of justice and uniformity of legislation and judicial decisions. Huh. Isn't that interesting how much power that is? To uphold the honor of the profession of law, to apply the knowledge and experience of the profession to the promotion of the public good, to encourage cordial intercourse among the members of the American bar, and correlate and promote the activities of the bar associations in the nation within these purposes in the interest of the profession of the public. Okay, that's their purpose, right? Hold on a second. Let me bring this up.
Okay.
Okay, this will be the end of the t-roh show after we come to this point for this week. All right, now, did anybody know that when you have not paid the payments on your car, if your car is worth less than $7,000, it's immune and or exempt from the bank taking your car? You'll never hear that from a lawyer, will you?
No.
Give you an idea of what's going on here. It says how to protect a debtor's car from seizure. Maria owns this is an example. Maria owns a 2005 Nissan Altima, which has a wholesale resale value of $7,000. Assume she is younger than the age 60 and not handicapped. Bank has a judgment against Maria. It holds an execution and wants to seize and sell her car to satisfy part or all of its debt. Right? Can a constable acting on bank's behalf seize Maria's car to satisfy the debt? Is she entitled to a hearing prior to seizure, prior to sale of a car? Answer: Maria's car is entirely exempt, leaving the question of how the exemption is honored. The law is silent on whether the creditor or constable must give notice to Maria prior to seizure. She is entitled to notice prior to sale. And that is the Massachusetts section there. Okay? Maria should assert her right to the exemption. She must show the value of her car, $7,000, is less than her $7,500 exemption. The law does not clearly prohibit seizure unless Maria asserts her exemption right to the creditor and constable. Oh, isn't that convenient?
Yeah, exactly. Perfect.
Okay. So these are the exemption laws, so you know that we're not making this up. On March 9, 2011, how to protect your client's cash and assets under new Massachusetts personal property exemptions. Do people know that they can't take homes? Didn't know that. They can't take up to $2,500 per month for rent or for a family that rents and occupies the home. They can't take that. They can't take anything. This is dealing on any judgment, folks. Okay, so a cop pulls you over, right? You don't pay a ticket. Now the cop's your creditor. He puts a lien on your vehicle. You get pulled over again. Registration has been suspended. They take your car. He can't do that. Can't do it. That's highly illegal. Because most cars that they take, the theft ring they run, okay, is usually a contract between the police station, the department, and the towing company. That contract's highly illegal. A towing company cannot keep your car for $180 debt. They can't do it. It's illegal. So because there's exemptions that they put in there, I guess some good people threw it in there. I know it wasn't Masons that did it. They put this stuff in there to show that you cannot make somebody homeless. You cannot take their car. You cannot garnish their wages. It's illegal. In other words, if there's garnishment on your, they can't garnish Social Security checks. They can't garnish anything like that. And we put this on the Rain into Heaven Society post. It's on the front page. You can read it on the exemptions and stuff. Masonic lawyers and judges hiding exemptions from the courts and everything. It says, exempt property is cash or assets which are beyond the reach of creditors. The purpose of the exemption laws is to allow a person who owes a debt to keep the basic necessities of life, such as clothing, food, certain cash, and often a car, in order to remain a productive member of society. So the contract that a police station has between the police and the wrecker service is a human rights violation. The contract itself is a human rights violation. We're not saying it, they're saying it.
Yeah, continue with that paragraph. Exempt property is unreachable regardless of whether
the debt is valid and owed. It is unreachable even if the creditor holds a valid state court judgment and execution. Okay, so Social Security income can't be. How many times has the IRS taxed the Social Security income? Supplementary Social Security income for age, blind, and disabled people. Certain benefits paid to veterans. 75% of weekly disposable wages is exempt. 75% of weekly disposable wages is all exempt. Now, how many times have men that have these kind of judgments against them, all of a sudden their wages are they're taking home $50 a week? In numerous Massachusetts exemption laws protects a debtor's income. Examples include income from public assistance, unemployment benefits, workers' compensation benefits, payments to families with dependent children. Nothing in the law prevents a person who owes money from knowingly and voluntarily paying over exemption income and turning over exemption personal property to a creditor, but agreeing to do so is often against the person's best interest. A debtor should almost never agree that a creditor can place a lien on exempt property. And how many times do they do it, folks?
Well, they go under the presumption that because you don't know the laws exist, that you're agreeing with it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I take it this is a bar doc. Is that where you got this?
No, this is actually from their laws, the Massachusetts laws.
Massachusetts. Okay, so
their bylaws. Their bylaws, get it? You know.
Yeah. So we've got a Masonic bylaw here that they really keep hidden and or don't even enforce.
No, they don't tell anybody about it. Okay.
Right. Excuse me. They enforce it. They just don't let anybody know that it's there for protective purposes. Yeah.
Right. So how to protect a debtor's car from seizure where the car is subject to a valid security interest.
This is on top of the idea that they're applying this stuff to non-members.
Yeah.
Wow.
Jenny owns a 2009 Subaru Forester with a wholesale value of $19,000. Jenny financed the purchase and now owes $14,000 to the finance company, which has a perfected security interest in the car. X holds a judgment and execution against Jenny for unsecured loan. Can X levy Jenny's Subaru? Answer, probably yes. Jenny should assert her exemption and demonstrate that to X that seizure and sale would be futile. If X seizes and sells Jenny's Subaru, it is first obligated to pay finance company's secured debt of $14,000 out of the $19,000 sale proceeds. It must then pay Jenny the entire balance of $5,000, 19 minus 4,000, 14,000. Okay, because it is less than her 7,500 exemption, and X gets nothing. Y'all get that? So it's the way it works. Does the debtor bear the burden of demonstrating that finance company's secured debt is $14,000? The burden probably falls on the debtor since she knows what the unpaid balance is. The creditor and constable do not. A lien search will reveal the existence of a lien, but not the current balance due. And often secured creditors are unwilling to disclose to third parties what the balance is, absent prior consent of the debtor. They know, okay, this is what I get pissed off at. They know this happens, what creditors are unwilling to do. So why aren't the creditors jailed? Never wondered that? Probably because those creditors are considered Masons. And Masons, under their oaths, are bound to each other over and above country. Okay? That's a crime. Secured creditors are unwilling to disclose to third parties what the balances do. But what the balance due is, absent prior consent of the debtor. That's a crime. But they never go after that, do they? So you're telling me that they've got to write exemption laws to keep that from happening? Come on, man. That's selective prosecution. So you can't tell me that this is not a secret society doing something that they shouldn't be doing, and this is how you deal with it, rather than just jailing the sumbitch. Come on. I mean, you know, it's just ridiculous. So there's no equal law. There is no rule of law. There's no nothing. That's all a farce.
That's right.
Okay, it's all a joke.
Say it again. Say it again. It's a farce.
It's a farce. There's no rule of law. There's no equal protection under the laws. There's no nothing like that. It's a joke. That's just a propaganda thing, so you'll go along with what they're talking about. Okay. How to protect a car of a person who is handicapped or older than 60. Okay. So how to protect a debtor's wages. Now, a creditor sues John, gets a judgment for $3,000, and seeks to seize John's wages. John's gross weekly pay is $500. Assume his net pay after federal and state and FICA is $400. How? So you pay $400 to the Masonic Lodge, or you pay $100 to the Masonic Lodge. Let's just get to what's really going on here. Okay. How much money must John's employers freeze for the benefit of the creditor? Probably none. The analysis is more complex than it may first appear because several statutes are involved. But it goes into this. And you can get a copy of this on the Reign of the Heaven Society post.
Stunning.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Yep, it is.
How many people have been made homeless because of this Masonic Lodge?
Yeah, no,
Do you see what I mean? It's ridiculous. But they wrote this in the bylaws. They probably passed this first, and then went to the seizure laws, so that they could cover themselves under human rights. But they don't tell anybody what they wrote before those seizure laws came through, civil forfeiture and all that.
Yeah, it's a fleecing beyond comparison. I mean, it is, wow.
Yeah, they even have a wild card exemption. That's funny. That's like a card game, right? Here's a wild card, the Joker. All right, Paula, who is neither handicapped nor age 60, owns a car worth $10,000. There are no liens. Paula owns no furniture and thus has an unused exemption of $15,000 under paragraph 2. Can Paula use the wild card exemption to protect the full $10,000 value from seizure and sale by a judgment creditor? Yes. But she must assert and prove her right to the exemption.
Is there a paragraph on proving your right to the exemption?
Well, you got to go to MGL chapter 235, section 34, paragraph 17 as amended.
Right.
Okay. So, like I said, folks, you can read all this. I take it with, in my own opinion, with a grain of salt, because I think it can be used, but you have such violent communistic things going on in the courtroom today. The only thing it's going to do is cause the enforcement of it to stop, because if the constable violates one of their own laws, you can call them on it and then expose the fraud of the whole thing. Okay, that's how it works, and that's how things have progressed in this country. Okay, I have zero faith in the state system, judicial system, the federal corporation judicial system. I have zero faith in that. It's all about if you're part of the club.
Yeah, I think we've made that more than self-evident. I think that the folks have to deal with the fact that it's not just lip service. It's not a bunch of, we're not a bunch of people sitting around a barbecue going, oh, the system's unfair. Oh, listen to this war story and blah, blah, blah. We're showing you the inherent principles that these guys operate under. And it's bad. Shocking.
It really is. It is bad. And to let you know what we get before we get off here. Okay, because people have asked us, well, why don't you have more, why doesn't more people see this? Okay, go look at how many hits 44 got on YouTube. And you'll see, I know this is a little blurry, so I do apologize for that, but I can read it to you. This was a day after, this was on the 17th, and it's 2 days after, or whatever, of the last t-roh show. It was 2207. That was 2,207 people that saw that hit this particular t-roh show post. In 2 days, that went up 200, or 1 day that went up 200. I don't even know what it is now. I haven't looked. This is just a couple of days after the t-roh show. Now go look at how many hits were on the actual video. Even if it were half, it still shows less numbers on the, or less hits on YouTube. So just, we're trying to prove to you, or I'm trying to prove to you folks, the numbers are being manipulated. So please don't be alarmed, because a lot of people do ask, well, why is it more people see this? Well, more people are seeing it. They're just not putting it on the little digits. So I saw that. I ended up getting a screenshot of it so people could see. This was the day after, 2,207 people. The total was 3,300 the first day. And then it just kept going up from there. And that was on Facebook. I don't know how many hits the Twitter got, but that was on Facebook alone.
Yeah, I think you got to be
YouTube. It was 448.
Yeah. I think you got to have your head buried in the sand if you don't know right now that the internet is part of their manipulative system.
Right, and they do operate under unanimous vote. By a unanimous vote, we've done it. Popularity. They always give the illusion that what they're doing is popular. Masons do. They always do that. It's one of their tricks. And you may
you see that. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You may, just to give you an example of intangible property rights. A cop will come back and tell you, well, driving's a privilege. Okay, what about my intangible property right to that privilege? That property right still does exist. It doesn't matter what they say. It matters what you're saying as far as intangible property rights are concerned. If you have an intangible property right to that privilege, when did I hand that over to somebody to take that intangible property right to the privilege away while I exercise that privilege? A privilege is property. I mean, it's property you can't see, but it is property, just like intangible property is. So no matter which way you look at it, you're still ignoring intangible property. Go ahead, let's do.
Oh, I was just going to address the manipulative nature. I mean, you see it with the videos now that folks are coming up with, where they're catching news organizations pretending that they've got a massive crowd and there's 30 people, So the society is rife with illusion. You have to break out of it, folks. You have to break out of live in the illusion.
Yeah, go through it. Really start dissecting what's going on, where the laws are coming from, where all this stuff is happening. And just because you think it's a law doesn't necessarily mean it is. It's coming from a private secret society. That's who's running your life. And which opens up to enormous amounts of abuses, which is happening every day today. It's beginning to blow up, and that's where the problem is. They're trying to show and prove to everybody, we run this shindig and you don't do nothing. That's tyranny, folks. Where do you think the tyranny came from that sparked the Revolutionary War in 1776? These same people, the same organization.
Yeah, I mean, think about it, right? You're walking around basically defenseless because they've got patrol people that are willing to grab you, beat you, throw you in a can, and then bring you into their court system when you're not even a member of their organization. I mean,
in regular words, that's called kidnapping. In international law, that's called human trafficking.
Right. And it happens every single day, every single hour.
Crimes go on right in front of you by people that you believe are there to protect you, and they're not there to protect the corporation. They're there to protect the Masonic Lodge. That's what they do. They protect the Masonic Lodge interests because that's what their oath says. That's why you can't normally find one. You can't find an oath anywhere, a certified oath of office or anything, because their oath is to the lodge. But what do? In order for you to stop you from finding out that their oath is to the lodge, he's a sovereign citizen, he's this, he's that, blah, 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 blah. He doesn't believe that he needs to go by the federal and state laws.
Yeah.
They do that crap.
Yeah. And, you look at, what folks commonly refer to as like growth of government. Okay. Well, what's really occurring is that it perpetually has to expand, because every time they get challenged, every time they discover a way that the fraud can be exposed, they have to create some sort of department, some sort of an agency that's dedicated to shutting that down.
And never shuts it down. That never shuts it down.
Yeah.
That's the growth of big government. Huge point, Stu. An enormous point. They never shut it down. That's where all these agencies are coming from. To hide more fraud. To get public confidence back that they're actually doing something.
Right. We've established a congressional committee to examine our findings are, so we're going to open another agency.
That reminds me, they have what they call a super Congress. I remember that. Remember the super Congress? They put together a super Congress to handle the debt.
Yeah, right. I don't remember exactly, but wasn't that 4 years, 5 years ago under Obama?
Yeah,
they were having the budget wars.
Yeah, so they came up with a super Congress, and I said, well, what are they going to come up with next? A super duper Congress? I said, they're not going to fix a damn thing. 4 months later, what their report was, they couldn't fix it. How about time? So they spent $150,000 to $300,000 trying to fix a debt that added more debt. When in reality, there isn't any debt at all. There is no national debt. And we proved that. A Monetary Impossibility Act. So, anyway, thank you for listening to the 45th broadcast of the t-roh Show. If you like the content, please subscribe. Give it a like. We do appreciate those. We are not monetizing it. We just like the fact that people like it. So thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Enjoy the work week.